Hey, Andrew, welcome to the show.
You, Rachel?
Well, let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Well, I am the youngest. I grew up on a farm outside of Clarinda, Iowa. The youngest of four boys. I grew up with lots of big dreams. Most of those dreams early on were hoop dreams, and committed a lot of my life to basketball. It was pretty tunnel focused as a kid. It was Jesus and basketball, and so grew up. By the time I would say end of high school, I realized the NBA was going to be out of reach likely. But I still went and played in college. I thought I went to play basketball, but as it turns out, I really went to meet my wife, and
Awesome.
I've been married 15 years. We've got four children, a fifth on the way. We'll be a family, almost entirely a girl family, four girls and one boy. Uh, and so we're so thankful for that. Um, and after college, went overseas, lived in three different countries playing basketball and doing mission work. And then after that, went back to Kansas City, lived there for 12 years, and really started my career. First was in the fitness industry. And so we were a personal training company, and I did about everything in the business except for the accounting part.
Yeah.
And it was where I was able to grow a lot professionally. And then in 2022, I shifted and got into commercial real estate. And now I am the COO of Legacy Acquisitions. We are a development firm currently focused on build to rent. And so part of what I do is I help run operations for our team, but I also partner with faith-filled investors to help build these thriving communities. And when I say thriving, it's a lot more than just the balance sheet and a return on investment. So we're really passionate about that. We've got three different communities right now, building about 500 homes total, and we have one that should be wrapped up by the end of this year. It's exciting.
That is exciting. I was doing research on you and I was with my son who plays basketball. Uh,
Uh-huh.
Very obsessed with basketball. I was like, look, he played overseas. He's like, what? That's cool. So I love that connection to basketball and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, so tell us about the build to rent model. What does that look like from maybe an investor's perspective? So I'm thinking of like our entrepreneurs who maybe they have some extra cash sitting around and they're like, hey, what can we do with this? So tell us about that.
Yeah, so development, a lot of people when they think of development from as an investor, it's one thing that comes to mind often is risk. That with development, there's more risk. Typically, there's also with that, it's risk adjusted returns. So your returns can be higher as well. So a higher ceiling. And so we buy at raw land, and then we take it up through all the way through the vertical construction and lease up of these homes. One thing I like about development, I talked on the risk side, but there's a lot of ways to mitigate that risk. And one of them is just kind of built into the process. So, for example, we buy raw land. Okay, it's a blank slate, and then the first phase. There's three phases in build to rent. The first one is you acquire the land and then you entitle it. And so when you bring these entitlements, you're working with the city, the local municipalities. You're working to find a product that the city wants, needs, and so there's a lot of back and forth in that process. You also got architects, and you're submitting different things to the city. And so, truthfully, most developers prefer to not do that part of it. That's the riskiest part. Um, but on all three of our developments, we bought it at raw land, and then we have a great team on the entitlement side. And so, as you entitle the land, you're getting it ready for phase two, which is a horizontal infrastructure. So now think It's going from raw land to roads. We're putting in sewers. We're getting the electrical and lighting ready. Anything needed to set up for phase three is the actual vertical construction of the homes and then the lease up. And at each phase, we're adding value. Okay, so raw land, we entitle it, boom, value's added. In fact, there's folks that have businesses that only do that. They buy raw land, and they entitle it, and they sell it. And so at each phase, we're able to add value and exit options. So with development, if you're doing it right, as you add value, you'll have the ability to exit the end of each phase. I mean, in reality, you can exit whenever, but the best time is after you've added value in each phase. So for an investor, that's one way we mitigate risk. Is those that come in early with us, they have the chance for the highest returns compared to those that come towards the end. But even along the way, markets change, things shift, get an offer that's going to be great for our investors, then we have that option to exit. And so that's some of my favorite things about it from an investor standpoint is you have that higher ceiling, but you also have risk mitigants, chiefly the ability to add value and sell really all the way through the process. And so typically for an investor, you're thinking, 5 to 7 year hold time, and that classic, which you see a lot with folks, 2x plus equity multiple if you're investing early. And so that's kind of the common profile. The other way that we've actually done a lot more of is through private lending, promissory notes. So we've got a great general partner team, and so we'll put those out. It's typically that higher floor. You're getting double-digit returns quarterly, and your cash outlay is 2 to 3 years instead of the 5 to 7. So that's a little bit about the process, a little bit of what I like for investors in it, and yeah.
Can we give maybe like an actual example of how much do you need set aside to invest in something like this?
Typically 50,000
Okay.
is the entry to it, and then all the way up from there, and your kind of options, your annualized return on a typical 5 to 7 year, of course, has changed from a few years ago with the interest rates going up. But if you're coming in really early, you can kind of that mid-20 annual return on up. If you're doing well in a development, those are some of the returns you can see, over that kind of 5 to 7 year timeline.
Okay. Let's make the math really, really easy. So let's say
Yeah.
because I want this to be like super tangible for people.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna like see this. So let's say we
Yeah.
have 100 grand in a property so we don't see anything the first year, but maybe the next year. How much would we expect to come back? And then like over the next 5 to 7 years, what would that look like?
So in the typical kind of equity type investment, where you have your general partners and your limited partners, you're not going to typically see cash flow towards the very end with development. So as we get into that third phase, we're building the homes and we're leasing out. And then once we hit break even and we start to cash flow because we've got enough homes leased up, that's when you'll start to get some return. But then at the end, with the sell or refinance, with a $100,000 investment, it's very reasonable to expect that you're going to get 200,000 plus back at the end of it when it's all said and done. So that's kind of in that 5 years, a typical goal in that kind of situation. And then if someone were doing to lend privately, you're looking at on $100,000 investment. That one typically does have cash flow because it's just a loan, like you're being the bank, and that's actually something that's really been growing as banks aren't lending as freely now, and it's kind of a gap that investors can take advantage of. And so on $100,000 loan, you could see 12,000 per year at least. That kind of is typically a starting point. But if you look more broadly, you'll see anywhere from 6 to 7% returns up to maybe 15 on private lending, depending on the operator and the project and fund and anything that goes into it.
What are the risks in private lending of a default payment?
Yeah, you gotta know who you're lending to. Knowing track record is really important. You gotta see what it's backed by. So sometimes in a private loan, it'll be backed by your high net worth partners and their assets. And so understanding what's behind those, and other times it could be by the real estate itself. So for example, not really what we do, but you'll see a lot in the single family fix and flip business that there'll be private lenders and their collateral will be the property that the fix and flipper is actually fixing up. So, typically those you'll see much shorter cash outlay timeline. 6 months is one that I see quite a bit in that, where these larger developments, you're going to be, you're gonna have that cash outlay longer, not 5 years long, but certainly 2 to 3 is not uncommon.
For someone who's maybe been investing in the stock market, what do you think are some reasons why they should also invest in something like this?
Well, I'm a really big believer in hard assets, and what they can bring. One of the biggest reasons is just diversification. Being diversified, if you look at how many income streams those that have reached a certain level of wealth have, it kind of speaks loudly. There's some level of diversification. That's one. Another is you depending on the operators in the project, even today you have the ability to get some really strong returns that are hard to get in the stock market. And again, there's certainly risk. There's folks that have lost their money or just gotten their original capital they put in back, and so it's there's, as I've been in this longer, you kind of see some of the SEC rules about accreditation or sophisticated investor, and I think a lot of the heart of it is the investor coming in needs to know the risk. There's real risk, and if someone invests and it would destroy their life if they lost it, they shouldn't invest. And because there is real risk, but I would say that's very project based, operator based as far as how much risk there is. So really getting to know the operator. Part of when I started, I actually joined a mastermind, and that's where I really developed a lot of relationships, and who I am partnered with and working with now. A lot of it was formed in that time. And I was coming in when the interest rates were starting to double, or on their way to doubling. And so the writing was kind of on the wall that things are going to get a little bit tougher in this case, whether you're capital raising or just operating. And it elevated for me the importance of partnering with someone who's been around for multiple decades, has been through multiple real estate cycles, because I'm just thinking, man, if I'm new on the standpoint of offering opportunities for investors to invest, I don't want my early investors to lose their money. That would be pretty rough. And so, that's where I come back to that operator side. It's just a huge part of it. Having a good business plan, making sure there's enough risk mitigants, there's enough, if things don't go perfectly as planned, which they won't, that there's still room, and there's still room to have a successful project. And so that part's just essential, is understanding the risk, but also understanding the operator, their track record, and that they're going to be able to execute business plan.
If we're looking at a project, how can we evaluate that investment and make sure it's going to be a good opportunity?
So a lot of things you want to look at. You certainly want to learn about the market, uh, and so you can look at headlines and learn about markets that way, and that can be really helpful. And there's certainly markets that get a lot hotter. There's been a number of markets in Texas, for example, in the last few years that have been very, very strong because you're looking at population growth, job growth, and some of those things. But then you also see markets, like Kansas City, for example, that where we lived for a while. It is very steady. It has some good growth markers. It's may not have the highest of highs, but when things get tougher, it's not going to get as low either. And so it's pretty steady in times where things are not as steady or a little bit tougher in real estate. Markets that may not be the primary markets still have a lot of success. And I think that's a big part of it. We're, in fact, right now in tertiary markets. We're in Lafayette, Louisiana. And within Louisiana, Lafayette's a great market, but it's not, it's still tertiary. And so it doesn't typically get the headlines as, other markets. But again, there's many markets where you can have a lot of success in. If you know the market, you understand the opportunity that's there, and it's real. So the market's a big part of it. The other part, it does come back to the operator and their ability to do it. And I think one thing you can look for in it is the track record. Track record doesn't guarantee that this one is going to be good, but seeing operators that have gone through the fire, gone through tough times, and seeing how they reacted and responded to that be so helpful because there are no guarantees in this, but I would say one of the ones that you could say is the business plan won't go exactly as planned. There'll be something that will be that gets thrown our way that you got to respond to and adjust to. Part of that is in preparation and being ready for them, but then also having a strong team can also help overcome some of those obstacles that will get thrown your way.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you wrote 5 Keys to Following Jesus while investing in real estate. Can you tell us about some of those keys?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones, and this goes through so much in life. I'm thinking about our children, and our oldest is 7 years old now, and so they're all pretty young. But when we are training our children up, and our goal is to train them up in the Lord, and then as they get older and their thoughts and their faith becomes more their own. It's just giving them a foundation and training them in the best way, and then trusting the Lord that He's going to take care of them. But one thing that I'm reminded of when, let's say, a child does something and you tell them not to, and then they do it again, and maybe you give them one more chance and they do it again, and then there's consequences. And sometimes when that happens, I'll ask one of my kids, like, do you know why you have this consequence? And they might say, this is a common one, because I got out of bed, the bedtime routine. We've said goodnight, and then they're out of their bed. And I said, well, not totally. It wasn't getting out of bed in and of itself isn't where it is, but you disobeyed. And I think that's just such a huge one, is obedience. Mm-hmm. So obedience to what? Obedience to the Lord and what He commands of us. That could be in interactions with coworkers, just in a normal work week, and it could be maybe the Lord does give you something very specific that you are to do, and when He does do it, it could be in how you treat your residents those in our case who are renting, and what you do, how you treat them and what you do to enhance their lives. Um, but obedience is just a huge one, uh, because without it, we're not going to follow Jesus well, and I'm not going to, And so um, that's one you see all through Scripture over and over and over again, and it's often the difference between some really huge blessings happening or some curses. You think about in the Old Testament, it says, "I've set before you these two things, these two mountains." And when we were in Israel, we went to the place, and they're two kind of big hills, little mountains, whatever, however you want to think of it, not the same size. And one was the mountain of blessing, and one was the mountain of curses, and they're both set before you. Which will you choose? And I just think about my life and the different times I've chosen one over the other. And sometimes they can kind of, uh, you might choose the mountain of curses, but it doesn't look like a curse.
Mm-hmm.
It actually looks sometimes like the opposite. But then after you chose it, you're like, oh man. And so obedience, just a huge one.
Has God asked you to do something, maybe in business that didn't really make sense, but you were obedient anyways?
Well, one thing. So right after Haley and I got married, uh, we I had I mentioned at the beginning, this was in me from a really young kid, and even though I realized NBA was out of reach, I said, well, I want to play professional basketball. And so playing overseas became the goal with that in our first year. And so I was looking for opportunities to do that. And we'd gone to Israel the year before and actually lived in Bethlehem for about 3 months.
Cool.
And that was with an organization called Athletes in Action. John Farwell led us. He teaches about Jesus' life from the Jewish biblical context. And so we lived there for 3 months. We played in a Palestinian professional league, and we did Bible tours. And so that was kind of my entrance to things overseas in basketball, and then met another man, John Jacobs, and he was going to go to Macedonia and was recruiting some Americans to go with him and to play on a professional team over there in Strumica, Macedonia. So this was shortly after we got married, 3 months after. And as we talked to the people about it and kind of shared, there was more than one time where the feeling it was kind of like, you're really thinking of moving overseas, within 3 months of being married. Like that's a lot of change. And we prayed about it. And I'll tell you, there was no definitive "you must go" or "you must stay," but it was kind of this freedom to choose. And I really believe that the Lord does put passions in our life, things that it's not that He's a part of that. And so we went, and so that was one time, but here's the thing: is that first year of marriage, if we hadn't have done that, we would have both likely had full-time jobs. And when we were in Macedonia, the pace of life was very different. I explain it as like a second world country. It's kind of in between, uh, time feels much slower there, and the pace of life is much slower. And the amount of time that my wife and I had in the first year together, it was such a blessing. And uh, we uh, made some money. We also raised support. It was enough to take care of us, but not much more. But the time we got, um, looking back, it was like, man, even that alone was such a blessing. And on the surface, it may have not looked like the right thing to do, but we're so thankful for it.
I love that. With your current business, how do you intentionally bring your faith into that business? What does it look like to kind of live out the kingdom in the marketplace?
So one way that we're really excited to do it, and we've actually just been able to start it, to get the ball rolling on it, and part of it is because of the stage of our development. We have one where we're building 104 homes, and we've got 70 that are up, and about 30 that are filled, and uh, and so we are going to bring on. We're calling it a community resource officer, but a person that we are partnering with. They're going to live in the community, and they're going to have dedicated time every week to doing a number of things. One is to engage in community, leading community events, creating opportunity for, whether it's a grill out, whether it's a Bible study, whether it's a welcome gift basket for someone, for a new resident, whatever it is, just really being the hands and feet of Jesus and meeting people where they are, creating an opportunity to invite people into more community, but also being a resource for people. So connecting people with things in the community that may help them, or resource in the community. And so we're just so excited to get that started and to have someone that's going to kind of be able to be the hands and feet of Jesus in that community, and then bring others along with them, whether it's brothers and sisters in Christ that can help in that mission with the community we're building. And so that's a really practical way that we're doing it, and excited to do it. And then the other thing is we're going to do it in this community, and then we're building 240 homes across town. And so it's going to be great to learn through this experience, and then to kind of refine the approach and go to a community that will be 2.5 times the size of this, and do it again.
That's amazing. What does it look like to you to make an impact?
Well, I think when we talk about impact, no matter if someone's doing it intentionally or not, they're making an impact. I think the question is, well, what kind of impact is it? Is it a positive one? Is it a negative one? Is it building up? Is it tearing down? When I think of kingdom impact, in general, um, it's got to start there. So you have one aspect is making an impact for eternity, you know, and that's the kind that where the math doesn't always show up in the here and now, and it's the part of living that can be hard to hold on to, because what's in front of us and what we see and touch is usually what kind of rises up. But living with the end in mind, with the end in sight, living with what is my purpose here, and then letting that vision, letting that mission be the guide to what we do in life, or more importantly, how we do what we do in life. And so, spiritual impact, eternal impact, big one. Um, but then practically in our business, can we do that and also get a good return for our investors? I say yes, we can. Can we do that and also have a place where residents like to live? They want to stay? Yes, I think we can. And so, what the Lord cares about is first and foremost our heart and why we do what we do. But I really think knowing your mission in life, and then working at integrating that with everything that you do. We'll do it imperfectly. We'll need accountability to do it and do it well. But I think that's a big part of it, is having the end in mind, the eternal type of impact. That's not up to us, but we're there to plant seeds, to help water, to help encourage and challenge and keep each other accountable. And then, Jesus said, I came to give you life and life abundant, and to walk that out every day. And I think, like many things that Jesus said, it could mean the first thing that we think of what is abundant life, but I think often it's in ways that we don't first think. It's ways that we may not imagine in the beginning, and then after, as we look back, we're like, man, that really was abundant living, even if in the moment I didn't realize it.
Yeah. So good. Where can we connect with you?
Well, one good way, or a way where I'm very active, is LinkedIn. I write 5 days a week there, so very active there. You can also go to our website. It's www.legacyacquisitions.com. But yeah, LinkedIn's a great way. I've got a couple resources like you shared, ebooks that you can download, learn more about following Jesus and real estate, and just about build to rent in general. And then I love online networking, but even more so taking it offline, getting on phone calls, and then when possible, meeting in person. But LinkedIn's a good way.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for being on the show. I really appreciate you and your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Rachel.